running parallel, and I think it's a book to build on. And when you build on what Nehemiah has done for the church, it's an exciting time. It's a very, very exciting time because along with his contemporaries, Ezra and Esther and others, you'll find that this is basically what happens in the last part of the Old Testament. Yeah? So the book might not be located there, but if you look at what happens before the Gospels, this is basically what comes to now. And it's not gonna be a verse by verse study. And I will allow Brother Stephen to go through the chapters as he would want to go through the chapters. But we're gonna make more application for the church today. And like I said, it's an exciting time because building is always an exciting time. When there was a existing structure or something that has been built. I told you a little bit of our travels when we were in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. And currently, if you go there now, you'll see Amazon Christian Academy, wonderful school, and they're moving toward university now. And that's something that is very, very exciting. And the brother whom we worked with, he has since passed away, sadly, but that vision continues. That dream is still there. And even with him not being here physically, I believe it will still happen. But the reason I mentioned that is we came there and it was an open field, a big open field. And the government said, well, we can give you the field, but how is this going to benefit the people around this field? And let me tell you now, a few years on, there is a fully functioning Christian school that offers everything, and a lot of what Zimbabwe offers now could not be offered through education. But with a school like Amazon Christian Academy, they now have tread new ground and it services that whole community. There's children that walk 15 kilometers also, almost, sorry, to get there. And it's amazing to see that once there was nothing and now there's something standing there. And the children look so beautiful in the uniforms and a really, really good and exciting vision that was put into action. And I guess the same with Nehemiah. There's a lot that has happened. And remember, they were in ruins, if you want to call it that. Temple is destroyed, their homes are destroyed, people were taken into captivity. And we basically now at the part where they actually came back out of captivity. And after being judged and after all of those bad things happened, they are now living their lives again. But what are they doing, Walton? They are busy rebuilding. And to a certain extent, they got comfortable with certain things. Now, back in times gone by, it was very important for cities to have walls. No, the city had to be encompassed by the walls. Why do you think it was important to have? And I mean, just logically, not even a Bible answer. Why do you think they would want walls around a city? Do you think it would be an important thing? Why would you think it's a good thing to have walls? Would it be a good thing, Tisha? Why would it be a good thing? For security reasons, it keeps you safe. No? It keeps you safe. So at the end, sometimes they used to say he has the keys to the city. We used to lock up the city. Why? Because at night, when everybody's in and they check, oh, Tisha's here, Brother Yako's here, Brother Stephen's here, Brother Blessing is here. Do you know what they do? They lock the city. They lock the city. Why? Nobody goes in and nobody goes out. Why? You don't need to go out. And tomorrow morning, we open up the city again. But they don't have walls. Now, the temple was rebuilt, their homes were rebuilt, and I guess there were other things that was rebuilt, but they did not have walls. And Nehemiah gets now drawn into this. And he gets drawn into this for one reason, firstly, and I would like to start there, is because he cared. He really cared about those people. And I don't know about you, but when you start to care about somebody, that's when you start doing things for them. If you don't care about them, chances are very slim that you're going to do anything for them. We must care. As God's people, we need to care for the lost. We need to care for the saved. We need to care for the strangers. We even need to care for the enemies. And it sounds wrong. You would say, but the enemies dislikes me. The enemies hates me. That's the people that need our care more than anyone. Nehemiah was a cupbearer. Brother Stephen mentioned some of this, so I'm going to try not to repeat. But it was not a position that was very, very looked down upon. It really wasn't looked down upon. It was a position where he got to a point where he was actually well respected for what he did. He was a cupbearer. And Angela, a cupbearer would be somebody that eats the food of the master before the master eats the food. So I guess you get to taste all of those good things before anything else. But he was a respected one. He was living a comfortable life and he was out there in Persia. And because of him caring, he gets drawn back now into, the people here in Jerusalem. And you would think that, but why would you do that, Nehemiah? This is none of your business. Stay where you are, because where you are is comfortable. Where you are, nobody needs to, you don't have to be bothered. You can go and sleep at night. Tomorrow you And in Matthew chapter 25, when it got to the one who had one talent and buried the talent, he said, Master, I was afraid. And maybe there were people there who was able, who was skilled, who had the opportunity, but they were afraid. So Nehemiah comes back. not like that I mentioned that, but if you don't care, chances are you're not going to show up. And I know how important it is for a little child when they're playing their first game to see mommy and daddy there. And if they don't see mommy and daddy there, guess what? They probably think you don't care because work is more important than my first game. Yes, it's a little friendly game or whatever else, but I expected to see you there. You see, when we care about something, we show up. That's the first thing that he did. And that's what Nehemiah did. And Nehemiah probably could have sent the email and said, Dearest beloved, I have heard that you are in ruins. I've heard that there's no wall. Good job on the temple that you've rebuilt. Good job on your homes and everything else that you got up to spec. But brethren, I'm concerned about the walls that is not rebuilt. Please find a solution to this problem. Dearest Nehemiah, and he sends the mail. It wouldn't have been the same. People would probably get that and look at it and say, the audacity. You tell us you love us, you tell us you care, but you send us an email and say, find a solution for your problem. But you know what Nehemiah did? He packed up where he was and he pitched up and he said, I'm here now. Let's work the plan. Let's rebuild these walls. You would think that there was a certain expectancy. There was a certain expectancy of the people who were there to basically do what was required. And I think with the Lord's church today, we are in a similar situation. There's a certain expectancy about a church. I don't know what your feel is about this or what your thinking is about this. But when you come to a church, and when I say church, I mean the church building here with the church members here. What do you expect? What is the expectancy? Do you think there's an expectancy, Brother Blessing? If you know nothing about church, you don't know anything about the Bible, but you see as a sign here is a church, and you come inside, what are you going to expect? What are you going to expect to see? What are you going to expect to hear? What are you going to expect to experience? Is there anything that you're going to expect, Brother Wycliffe? What are you going to expect? Preaching. You're going to expect preaching. Would you be surprised if there's no preaching? You would be surprised? What else would you expect? Singing. Would you be surprised if there's no singing? You would say, I would have expected them to sing. I've been to a church where they didn't sing, by the way. It was a long story, but they didn't sing. It's very different. Anybody else? What do you expect when you come to a church? Excuse me? People. People. I'd be surprised if there's no people. I'd be like, I would have thought that the Christians actually come here. You know, that they show up. But if they don't show up and I'm going here, I'd be very surprised and say, oh, I thought that, you know, they would be in the pews with me. So did he show what did you say? Kindness. But yeah? Kindness. Or expect kindness. Kindness. You would expect to have kindness, no? And I agree with everything that was said. Because there are certain things that people would want to see. Do you think it makes a difference if somebody comes here and part of the bricks of the building is out? The gate has fallen over. The trees are overgrown. The doors are not varnished. The bulbs are broken. There's only two of it burning. Half of the ceiling is taken out. The pulpit is laying on its side. Do you think somebody would seem that to be weird? Do you think it would seem very, very, things are not okay here? Things are not in order here? The people come and they are in the foyer and they say, oh, just find a seat. If you can find a seat, if there's no seat, sorry, you're going to have to stand. So there's a certain expectancy of that things must be in order. Now, they're not members here. They don't know what the history is behind all of this. But if they come into a setting like that, they might find it very, very not welcoming. And they would say that things are not okay here. But you know what a difference it makes when they come in and there's actually a way, there's a sign that directs me to turn to the left. And the trees are not overgrown. And the foyer is very, very welcoming. And there's somebody there that greets and say, good morning. Are you visiting with us this morning? Or you invited by somebody? Then you show them to your seat. They come and sit down in the pew and the pew is clean. There's nothing, that should not be there. All the seating panels are there. The lights are burning. The song is leading, singing. The preacher is preaching. And they start to realize, you know what? Things are in order here. You know, they almost take the lead from that and say, I can see myself coming here next week again. Because it seems like these people, they know what they are doing. Now, some people might say, oh, these are secondary things. If you come, you must love the Lord. Yes, but I think this is what actually gets you there. So if somebody comes into Jerusalem at this time, they got to say, listen, there's some things here that's good. That's really, really good. And we can probably understand that you've been through a rough time and you're busy with the rebuild. But there's one thing lacking here, and I guess it's the walls. How about we get the walls also in order? Because you see, it's either you do all of it or you might as well then just quit on none of it. And once you start doing all of it, it's going to require that everybody gets along. And this is point number 6, point number 7, I guess. And we got to get there. But we started by the first thing, and the first step I would want to say is that you need to care. Nehemiah cared, and he knew that, you know what, there's a sort of a purpose here, or there's a sort of a motivation here. And the reason we must care is, let's go to Nehemiah chapter 1. Because if we inquire about the things of the Lord, it's going to get us involved. Nehemiah chapter 1 says, the words of Nehemiah, the son of Hilkiah. It came to pass in the month of his name, in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan in Kitharel, that Hananiah, one of my brethren, came with men from Judah, and I asked him concerning the Jews who had escaped, who had survived the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the survivors who are left from the captivity in the province are there in great distress and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem is also broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. So it was when I heard these words that I sat down and wept and mourned for many days. I was fasting and praying before the God of heaven. So you can see how it affects this man. And he heard of this report and he's now affected. And he said, you know what? I inquired about this and I wept about this, and I'm going to start to pray about this. So after he says that I care, and we can see that this person cares deeply for these individuals, guess what? He now starts to pray. And he starts to pray, and I believe that when you start praying to God, that's when things start to happen. God will provide for your opportunity. God answers your prayer. God does things that we cannot do. And sometimes there are such a lot that the Bible teaches us of our responsibility toward others. And it's such an upside down religion, some people might say, because usually it is for us, what can I get out of it? Where's my benefit in all of this? But in the Christian religion, it's like, what can we do for someone else? How do I consider someone else better than myself? How do I esteem someone else better than me? And there's such a lot of verses in scripture, but some of it that I selected would say, if your brother becomes poor and cannot maintain himself with you, you shall support him as though you were a stranger and a sojourner, and he will live with you. That's in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 35. Deuteronomy 15:11 says, there will always be poor people in the land. Therefore, I command you to be open-handed toward your fellow Israelites who are poor and they are needy in your land. Proverbs 29:7 says, a righteous man knows the rights of the poor. A wicked man does not understand such knowledge. In Matthew chapter 10, verse 8, Jesus said, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, therefore freely we give. I make mention of this because if we want something to be done, we need to care. First and foremost, you must care. If you don't care, then you're probably not going to do it. And you might say, well, brother, maybe what we should do is we should write down everyone's name and put it up front here. To start off, that would be a terrible idea. But we're going to put everybody's name here. And we're going to say for this week, our brother Walton, he did this. And we put down what he did there. So, Brother Walton, good job, great. Brother Theo, he didn't do much. There's nothing there. And chances are Brother Theo is probably not going to come back next week. Because what is up there on display is probably very embarrassing to Brother Theo. I'm not saying that we are going to put up a board here and display what has been done and what has not been done. But what I will say is this, that as far as our convictions run, what have I done for the Lord? For this past week, what have I done for the Lord? for the furtherance of his kingdom. Is it my responsibility? I'm helping the school there. I'm busy with handover things. As my move here happened, not suddenly, but it took a different twist with Brother Yankel's passing, obviously. I'm doing a handover there now because I do devotions and stuff for the children at the East Ridge Christian Academy. And we spoke about responsibility. And we spoke about having a responsibility or being responsible. And I said, sometimes people, they don't fulfill their responsibility. Sometimes people shift their responsibility. Often it happens in the church where it gets shifted, to somebody else. Usually the preacher. Preacher, you're the one that's here representing us. So you know what? You do it. And it usually happens that way. I'm busy. I've got a job. I've got a family. I've got the recreation. So I don't have time. So guess what, preacher? Why didn't you do it? And that's basically abdicating your responsibility and saying to somebody else, this is what I should be doing. But guess what? I'd rather have you do it because I don't have time. With Nehemiah, obviously he was working with people. And don't you think there was people there who really had other responsibilities? Yet when Nehemiah arrives back, he says, listen, this is all of our responsibility. Universally, we all want to put this wall up. We're all going to benefit of this wall. So I'm going to need all of you on board. You see, he cared and he prayed, but he had a plan. And I think that when we look at a congregation of the Lord's church, you must have a similar sentiment. You must care. If you don't care, you're probably not going to do anything. Secondly, you must pray. Why? If you don't pray, you're going to seek guidance elsewhere, not from God. And that's dangerous. Very, very dangerous ground. You can ask the apostles when they wanted to select someone else. They prayed. Why? Because they sought guidance from God. If they sought guidance anywhere else, somebody probably would have said, maybe don't choose him. I don't like the way that he looks. Maybe choose him. Somebody would have given different advice, but they knew from God they were going to select the right person. And so you can go on. So we seek counsel from God. We pray. That's what Nehemiah did. And then he had a plan. Why? Because the guidance received from God gives you the plan. If you don't have the right plan, you're not going to build the right building. And the wall would have looked probably very different if they didn't have the right plan. But they did have the right plan. And I'm saying this because in the Lord's church, what is the plan? I think that individually, we all have talents and abilities that God has blessed us with. And God must be glorified with that. But I think universally, there is responsibility that falls on everyone's shoulders. Something like making disciples of all nations. I think it's everyone's responsibility. It's not dependent on if you can speak publicly, or if you have a vehicle, or if you can write, or if you can talk. I think the responsibility falls on every Christian. And some might put their hand up and say, brother, I disagree with you. That's the preacher's job. He went to preaching school. He studies the scriptures. He's probably got the time to do it. We don't. Because I have a family and I have a job and I have a tennis match that I need to get to. That's abdicating responsibility. That's moving away from your God-given responsibility. And that's something that we cannot do. We know that when we start to care, that's when things start to happen. When we start caring, we need to pray about it. And Nehemiah, and Uncle Stephen spoke a little bit about praying last week. But the prayer of Nehemiah, it wasn't a prayer of repentance. It wasn't a prayer of, God, I'm sorry about all of this. Basically, the prayer was, Lord, what would you have me to do? What would you have me to do? Isaiah said, yeah, I send me. And I guess if we can have an attitude of that nature, we would have to stop people from volunteering their time and their services and their efforts and even sometimes their finances. Because if we really were to help the way God wants us to help, people will be flooding in here and be like, what can I do for the Lord? Preacher, how are things? Because that was Nehemiah's thing. He just inquired. Preacher, how's, Brother Theo, how's things here? How are things? Is the leadership okay? There's no longer an eldership at the congregation here. How has that gone? How is things as far as our evangelism, reaching out for the lost? What are we doing to save the lost? On that note, what are we doing for the saved? Because you know what the preacher's nightmare is, eh? As much as and remember how we'll be plotting and we're planning. Why? Because we're going to evangelize and we're going to go seek and save the lost. And once we get there, Brother Walton, guess what happens? Those who are saved run out the back door. And we have to scream to somebody and say, close the back door, just close the back door. Because now we bring the lost in and we say, welcome to our congregation of the Lord's church. And we look, where's the saved? And the saved ran out the back door. And we say, oh, now we spend another couple of years trying to get those who are saved back into the pews, while obviously maintaining and holding those who are new in the faith. I'm saying that because that's probably the preacher's nightmare. And it's things that you think about. Who's no longer here? Why are they no longer here? It's difficult when the walls have been burned. It's very, very difficult when the temple has been destroyed, when your home has been uprooted, when families were taken apart, and some were taken into captivity, and some went in other places, and some died. And are you trying to recover? And that's where we are in the book of Nehemiah. But we are in the recovery mode now. And I cannot help but relate and say, we're probably in the recovery mode here. We're building again. We are building, and if you finally look at certain things that's taking place, we're making progress. We really are. And I guess I'm optimistic by nature. And some people say, yeah, you're overly optimistic or you're too optimistic. But let me say something. When you are passionate about something, when you have a God-given purpose, few things will deter you from it. Now, I would have thought in reading through this book, and it's 13 chapters, and I would encourage you to read it through different lenses. I read it firstly through just reading it. The second time I read it through the eye of responsibility. The third time I read it through the eye of leadership. And I'm putting myself in all of these shoes because what am I responsible for? As far as leadership, what am I doing and what am I not doing? Where do I fall short? And the reason I say that is because our purpose and our passion play such a big part in all of this. Because there's few things that will stop you. Now, I would have thought that God would have said, okay, there's a lot happening here. There's a lot happening here. And you probably want these walls to be rebuilt. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop everything else. Nothing else is going to bother you. Okay? I'm going to keep everything at bay. And I'm going to allow you to build these walls. I guess when Brother Stephen is going to get to those chapters, you're going to realize there was such a lot of other things happening here for these people. They had to fight off enemies. Satan came for them, and he came properly. It wasn't a half-hearted attempt. And you would think, God, why couldn't you just keep them away and let them focus on the wall? And I guess the same thing with our life. And I cannot help but make an application in my life today. There's a lot happening. But you know what? There's certain things that must continue to take place. If I'm going to rebuild the wall, that must take place. I can't abdicate my responsibility and say, you know what? I cannot be helping you rebuild this wall because my toe hurts. I'm sure there's people who were there more than their toe was hurting, but they were still rebuilding the wall. So it's so important, brethren, that other things does not take the place of God. It does not shift. If there's a priority list, and this is something we do at the beginning of every year where we have a priority list, and you're always shifting things. Okay, so you will maybe put some things on the list and say, oh, I need to get my physical health on track. I need to, let me tell you something. This is a little bit of what I did this weekend. I've been putting off cleaning our yard now for a few weeks. And our kitchen sink, whenever you're washing up, you see the yard. And Auntie Maria, the yard wasn't getting better. It wasn't getting better. And I would come there day after day, week after week, and sometimes I just open the blinds to hope maybe somebody broke in and somebody just cleaned the yard, and ran away again. It didn't happen. Actually, by the way, somebody did that last week for us, one of our neighbors. And we took out some meat and we left it on the sink. When we came home, guess what? There was a fresh pot of biryani on the stove, all done, made. And that's what all my neighbors do. I've got really good neighbors, by the way. And there's also a key at our house. So they kind of break into the house. And she was tidying up a little in the house and things. And she saw the meat on the sink and she just took the initiative and she made a pot of biryani. Wycliffe, There's few things in the world that excites me. But when I came home and I got that smell of the biryani, I was really, really overjoyed. And I couldn't help but hug Auntie Nolene because Auntie Nolene is a great lady to have as a neighbor. Anyway, she didn't clean the yard, by the way. I come and I clean and we're washing up and we take turns, myself, Madison, Amy, and we're all looking through the blinds or whatever, and the yard is not cleaned. And the dog messes in the yard and the weeds. We've got some beautiful weeds that grow. They're not supposed to be in the garden, but we almost train ourselves to think that look at these beautiful flowers, but they are weeds. Look at all the beautiful flowers. No, they're not flowers, it's weeds. And yesterday we could not anymore. Yesterday, I think everybody got to the point of, you know what? Let's clean this yard. And let me tell you, my back hurts as I'm standing here. There's a lot that hurts, Brother Finn, not just my back. We probably didn't have the right tools for the job. Maybe we didn't have the right time for the job or whatever else. But after yesterday, we just said, to this point and no further. And everybody just had to grab something. And we started tackling that yard. Let me tell you what, when we get to our yard this afternoon, we can go sit in the yard, we can go play in the yard, we can go dish out food on the floor and eat off the yard floor. That's how the great job that we did. But I'm so glad that we did it. There's a sense of satisfaction. When I went to go sleep last night, I thought, sure, I'm so glad that's done. When I go wash up this afternoon, whoever's turn it is, I'm going to stand there and I'm going to open the blinds. I'm probably going to take the blinds off, Walton. Why? Because I can now look outside there and it's clean and it's pleasant to look at. The reason I say that is when a Christian does what God wants him or her to do, we have a similar sense, even a better sense of feel inside of us. To say that, you know what? The Lord, as a disciple, He firstly told me to follow Him, and I follow Him. I obeyed the gospel, and now I'm making disciples of all nations. It's a sense of I'm doing the best I can for the furtherance of the kingdom. That's the feel that we want. I'm not talking about cleaning yards here. I'm not talking about doing things in our personal life. What I'm saying is our God given responsibility as Christians. How are we doing there? Because if we do put it up on a board and we do write down what is being done and what is not being done, how embarrassed would we feel? Would it bother us? Do we care enough to say that, you know what? I'm going to do something about this. I'm not happy with the little bit that I'm doing. Now, the little bit is probably more than someone else, but guess what? I can do more. The Lord has blessed me with more. He's blessed me with more ability, with more opportunity. And I want to do more for the Lord. Some of the greatest requests that I have taken at the altar call was, I would like to rededicate my purpose to the Lord. Some of the greatest requests, simple, but very noble. Why? That's someone that's not happy with the way things are in their life. They're not blaming anybody. And these people in the book of Nehemiah could have said, but Nehemiah, there's enemies coming and we must fight them. Nehemiah, the devil is. Those excuses were not going to be excused. There was a plan. And the plan was that we're going to rebuild the wall. I guess the same for us today. How much do we care to want to rebuild the wall? Maybe Satan has come in and broken down the walls. Maybe our walls were burned with fire. Maybe we have suffered loss in an area that we never ever expected we would lose. On Friday, we left here. I had to bring the girls with me because their school was closed. Their teachers were at some sort second thing is let's pray and ask God for guidance. And then the third thing would be let's plot and plan. Let's plan as we go along. And we're not probably going to build the whole wall in 1 week. But you know what? In 100 weeks, maybe we can build the whole wall. So that's the plan, and let's work towards that plan. God has done great things through those, people who just volunteered their time, volunteered services. And I guess we can have that same benefits if we say, God, what you have blessed me with, and the opportunity you allowed me to have, what can I do for the furtherance of your kingdom? I want to help. I want to be on board. I want to be in the front line and in the benches. Let's see what can be done to rebuild the walls that we have. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Our time has expired. I pray, God, that we will figure out this thing. Why can't I will just sit so we can see the slides, and it helps so I don't have to say anything, but you can rather read it from the screen. Let us pray together. Father, we are glad and thankful again that we can learn, especially from your word, and be encouraged by it. It gives us hope. It gives us a sense of that things in this life sometimes that seems impossible, but we serve a God of the impossible, and everything through you is possible, Lord. Yes, Father, we might have failed you. Maybe we have had a week where we did not do much or anything for the furtherance of your kingdom, and we pray that you forgive us. But help us to pick up the baton, and help us to pick up our cross, and help us to do what is pleasing in your sight. Thank you so much